board picture of himself, and he had a banana leaf hanging down from his. He was naked in a wine vat. So he was stomping grapes, which he would make vinegar, and he sold lots of vinegar. But that was funny. He looked a little like Zappa, that kind of picture, and he had that banana leaf hanging from him on that billboard. It said, "Get Mondo Dagnella's outstanding vinegar." I thought it was pretty cute.
So, Mr. Green comes over to fix our toilet because we're living on his property. Mm-hmm. So he's over to fix the toilet. And he was in his typical suit and tie, and he takes his jacket off and loosens his tie and gets down to business, and he fixes the toilet. And he saw the picture that we had, and it was like an 8 by 10, of Frank Zappa, and he's like, that's pretty funny. And we're like, wow, because he seemed so straight. Ah. He was an insurance salesman.
You'd have to laugh at that.
Frank Zappa is a very abstract kind of a guy, and so we're like, wow, you just never can tell these days.
Drugs, yeah.
So we're like, you just wouldn't have thought that Mr. Green would have been into Frank Zappa.
Yeah.
So we kind of just like observed that, and we tucked it away. And then it came time for us to move. I was on my way to England. And so we're going to meet with him, have the final inspection of the apartment, give him our keys, and shake his hand. And we wanted to give him something special because he'd been real good to us. So we made a copy, a really nice photocopy, and even blew it up a little bit of the Frank Zappa, the Phi Kappa Zappa.
Great.
We rolled it up as like it was a scroll and tied it with a little ribbon.
As
and got him a
his
card.
certificate of graduation from the university. I like that.
Exactly. Right. And so there we are, we're doing our thing, and we give that to him, and he opens it up, and he was completely mystified.
Wow.
He was like, why are you giving this to me? And we said, well, remember when you came to fix our toilet last year, and that was in our bathroom? He's like, oh, yeah. And we said, and we thought it was great that you were a Frank Zappa fan. And he said, who's Frank Zappa?
I love it. He just likes a guy that looks pretty interesting.
He said, I thought it was you.
Yeah.
Me. He thought it was me.
Oh, really?
When I was 23, I looked a lot like that.
I'll be that.
He thought it was me all that time, that I would take a picture and put it up in my bathroom.
And he never made any moves on you. I'm saying they wouldn't be that. Not in a crapper.
Not Mr. Green.
Yeah.
Well, you guys sounded good there and looked good too, so keep it going.
Cool.
All right.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, when we last tuned in, Don was, well, we were all over the board, but he was exiting, let's say, the story of the Chicken Ranch, although we probably will return to some of the elements, because it is one of the great stories of Don's life. But another sort of more extended, but in some ways similar story was the story of, who would have thought, IBM. How were you chosen to work for such an elite company as a young man?
Well, it was interesting. My sister Betty, who was actually the oldest in the family, and she passed away at about age 62. I think she had breast cancer. And she was married to a guy that was a research physicist, a rocket scientist for IBM Corporation. And when she married him, and I got to be a friend of his and everything, I looked at the kind of life he had with IBM, and that's what got that interest in me. Plus, I knew that to get a job with IBM, baby, you better be ready for this one.
Mm-hmm.
And
did you really believe that you were?
It was kind of weird in that I thought, because I had the in of a well-respected physicist, brother-in-law, that he could make whatever phone calls, and all life is, that type of thing, if you understand it correctly. And so I thought my in was Kenny. Ken Ska was his name. Well, then he got bought away about the time I was getting out of school and I wanted to get with the IBM thing. He was bought away at a big price tag by some other tech company like they, did back then. And so all of a sudden I didn't, it was like, oh shit, man, this is what I was really focusing on. And so when I graduated in 1968, and I tried to hold out.
Graduated from college.
College.
Okay, Cal State Fullerton.
Yes.
Okay, and you were able to get that education with the GI Bill.
With the GI Bill, actually, and Nancy, my first wife, was a teacher, so she taught while I went to school and got my education. And so it was kind of let me think, it was kind of not an easy transition, but it kind of came together, as far as being in the military at the time I was, and then getting out, and then in my first ex-wife situation, it was Nancy was my sixth grade girlfriend from Bismarck, North Dakota. So after all these years, we get together and then meet. I went to get married, and I was, I had been over in Japan for a little under 2 years. And to get back to the States, once you've been over there, regardless how much fun you're having, there's something about being, as I say, a round-eyed human being, and not to be ethnic or anything, but that was kind of an attitude. And Nancy was from a great family, and yada yada, on and on and on. And so it was, I guess, the right thing to have happen.
But it was very competitive.
Absolutely.
You don't just waltz in and say, "Hey, where's my desk?"
Yeah, and what was the guy that fortunately I interviewed in Westchester, California, which was the territory that I had, like in Century City, Beverly Hills, Pacific Palisades, Malibu, Venice Beach, all of those, wow, back then that was a great place to be in a pinstripe suit. And so to be there at the time I got there, and then to interview this guy, that actually maybe I can remember his name even with Alzheimer's, but Tom Bowman, and he had been in Grand Forks, North Dakota, and just by chance, he had hired a guy to sell for him over in Fargo, in Grand Forks, North Dakota. Tommy Opp is this guy's name. So later on, after Tom hired me, and I mean, I beat out a lot of people.
So a guy named Opp hired you?
No, a guy by the name of Tom Bowman hired me.
Oh.
But he had hired Tommy Opp
I see.
in North Dakota. And when he met me, he thought, smooth talking devil Christian guy,
Yeah.
He said, if I had known, you were nothing like Tommy.
Yeah, that was
said,
where
he said, but you sell just as good.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, so that's how I kind of got in.
You beat out how many other people?
There was supposedly 71 applicants.
Mm-hmm.
And they went through, they probably did final interview on 20, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And to be especially not only just IBM, but to be one of their dancemen, as I call it, because their project, as thing evolved in high tech, the power of the computer was coming to light, and the deficiencies were pretty much left in the administrative workstation, which was connected directly to what was going on in the mainframes and the DP environment. Well, the data processing sales guys were boring as cold tea. They just weren't the dance guys, the entertainers, the personalities.
Hmm.
So the guys that I got to work with, especially being IBM, they could pick anybody they want out of any school, and especially the guys that really wanted to sell, because you could make good money with IBM back then.
And so you were surrounded by, I would think you were surrounded by guys that went to prestigious universities
Man, I mean,
and
to
came
tell you,
from bloodlines.
When I reported in on those first days with my half polyester, half wool suit, my furred Fidinskal start shoes, and kind of like, I don't know, the What Me Worry kid from Dakota. And it didn't take long to get
Alfred E.
into
Newman.
stuff. The Alfred E. Newman of IBM. But it was something that really, it was an education in presentation. It was at a time when companies there were the big ones like IBM that kind of controlled everything. And so even though what you did wasn't assured, it was far and ahead of anybody else. And so when I'd go, I got to spoil life in California, North Dakota guy in California, in stars. I mean, got Gunsmoke people, Wayne Newton, Buddy Epson, the Beverly Hillbillies, all that shit was like, I got to meet your friend Hobo Jenkins the other day or whatever. So it was really a trip. to drive back in those hills where those privileged people stayed and sit down and talk to them about things that had probably worked for them. And I think because I really had a feel for that. I think, when you see somebody that's done well and got a lot of notoriety, the tendency is to think that they're kind of into themselves. When in fact, I'd say the majority of them are in desperate need of somebody that gives a rat's butt and doesn't just want a piece of their action or their picture taken with somebody and annoyingly. And it was my privilege to be around people over time where they had more money than they ever needed. So because I was their friend and they knew I didn't have, a couple $1,000,000, they would buy everything. I mean, trips and everything. But after a while, you can't do that. All of a sudden, it's like, thank you, but no thank you. So I guess my understanding of the people that were fortunate enough to be in those places got me, especially with that broker thing, got me into environments that I normally would have never been in. Even if I just used that later on to get in the door of places. Because everybody wants to talk to the guy that innocently was for 8 months the CEO of a brothel. I mean, we had to see why he's not in jail. And then they find out I'm like an evangelist. I mean, I save people.
Well, the part of the IBM experience that I like the most is, as I understand it, you went into offices with secretarial pools,
Yeah.
and you brought them what were considered at that time to be miracle products.
Absolutely.
And you sold primarily women on these advantages, and how could their bosses ever say no? And what a great gig that is.
Well, you just had to find out who was doing what and then extort them into buying the machine for their favorite secretary, if you know what I mean. So it was kind of just part of Americana marketing for the big companies. You just had to know how the game was played and then have the courage to institute it. And it was really quite interesting. I'd experiment a lot with, first of all, the privilege of getting into the environment that most people don't get to do. And then representing a company that's head and shoulders above everybody else. So you're led to believe that you're somebody special anyway. And you give that to a compulsive dance man. I mean, that's all they need, and it's fun. And boy, when you get invited to some of those parties, and I mean, it's like if I start recalling too much, it affects my weak heart. Because I got to admit, it was fun. Because it was kind of pretty much all in the house. God, I miss the expense accounts. Shit, the money I get today, I would get that in just an expense account in the old days. We'd pad the hell out of that thing because everybody was in cahoots. I think we did kickbacks to the company, the corporate accountants. He get 20% of whatever we packed in our expenses, something like that. But yeah, it was a great time to be part of that stuff. And then to look at it, like we were talking the other day about, there are times I think, man, did you really do that? Not that it hurt anybody, but it was kind of not an opportunistic, just opportunistic, but just a kind of a different way of looking at things. And when I found out that when I got to Vegas and started doing the bank stuff again after the ranch and those temporary things, I just really learned a lot about people. My whole life has been interacting with either Fang, the mean woman that protected the boss in big corporations, the lady that wanted to chew me up and spit me out. And my task at hand was to, and I still remember the ladies, my task was to get past Fang into the guy that said, I can understand why you let this guy get into the inner sanctum. He's good. Thank goodness, because he can really help us. And so once...
And you did that with charm?
Yeah.
Any other tools?
Honesty.
Okay.
Yeah, just feature, function, benefit, feel, felt, found. I mean, it's everything. You go to somebody with, like I did with the kind of water thing. Man, yeah, and you get overbearing sometimes. Yeah, it feels so good. And it's the same thing in that. You have to kind of temper getting too much into something that you just kind of convey. I can't understand how you'd be such a moron and say no to this, because that is conveyed a lot.
Uh-huh.
And boy, I'll tell you, I took on probably the toughest games with Wall Street, because when you're working with people's money, the only reason they hire a broker, for the most part, is so they have somebody to blame.
Mm-hmm.
Because the story is apt to change, and you're not going to win all the time. And once the worst thing that can happen is somebody to come in and take 50 grand out of a CD and put it in something that within 6 months they've made 50% on it. And then now you got the problem: do we take profit and run and look for another thing that we hope is going to be correct, or do we stay there and let that thing back off, because it will? There's no more buy and hold in Wall Street. That's insane, because it's too manipulated, too contrived, too dishonest.
But before your brokerage days, we're back at IBM now.
Yeah.
And these are your sales dance man days.
Mm.
And now you've gotten past Fang and you're in the inner sanctum.
Yeah.
What happens there?
Well, then is when you really better put together, and they were just getting into PowerPoint presentations, the more high-tech display thing, as opposed to when I was going into that, they were still using, believe it or not, flip charts and some stuff.
Uh-huh.
So the better you got at getting to the point on what you wanted to arrive at, the objective of the call, and then fashioning what was of interest to the people, your audience, and what they would bring their chime, that was the art form. And you got to a point where, man, some of the stuff I talked about, where it was going to be a paperless world with all of that, man, we're cutting down more trees now than we ever imagined, because it wasn't a paperless world. You still had to make 2 copies of the electronics now, because just in case. So all of a sudden, the explosion of paper usage was amazing.
But I'm thinking about, you walk in and you are almost like the Willy Wonka
Yeah.
of office products, and you get to bring people correctable ribbon typewriters,
Yeah.
or any, like pick your era of miraculous things that all of a sudden increase productivity, and for the secretary, for the administrative assistant, makes her life better and easier.
I mean,
and you get to be that guy.
Without boasting at all. In fact, that's an area where I really don't talk about too much, because all phases of human emotion, especially in a working lady that back most of probably the ladies in their 20s to 30, maybe somewhere where there was a majority of the market. And to think that in the olden days, man, you started a legal document, a lot of typing.
Mm-hmm.
And then before erasers or whatever, carbon paper, I mean, you had to erase the top one and then move that, and it drive you crazy.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden along comes this guy says, look, you do it one time, and we're either going to store it on a magnetic card or a loop spool thing. So you're going to save all of the 95, 98% of your repetitious words in a legal document, and the machine will stop at the point where you plug in the variable, and then it will adjust. If you want justified right-hand margin, it'll do all that automatically. And then it'll spell check everything, so you'll never be admonished for not knowing your ass from third base about spelling superfragilistic, So how'd I ever come up with that? But anyway, it was one of those things, and you can imagine to know that I had, and the lady thinking, hopefully the ability to sell this and justify it, because it'll make my job 90% easier. It'll be 100% perfect. Along with that is pay raises, more impressive work, and all of a sudden it spread like a prairie fire. Every girl wanted one. In fact, I think they started interacting with their bosses just so we could blackmail them to get them one. No, that's not true.
Well, and they interacted with you as well.
Well, a few.
A few.
But it was kind of interesting too. It wasn't even a hustle. When you get around professional people, male probably excluded, but where they work is hard, and back then were not paid properly, worse than today. The recognition factor wasn't there. It was kind of me, Tarzan, you, Jane attitude, and which is now gone. Of course, there's a lot of wealthy law firms now that it's gone. But to treat or to have people kind of as the secondary citizen working in the job that the success went to the attorney when the real work went to the paralegal.
Mm-hmm.
And it's still that way. But that's the game. If you get that certificate, that law degree, and get to put up that piece of paper, it means something. It's out of reach for a lot of people. But, just to... it took me a while when I got out of IBM and went into Wall Street to not walk into, because of the training, any office and do a scan and pretty much have sized up what the potential and how the approach was going to go. And so it became almost robotic. You could just understand. And everybody has the same problem, really. There's nothing new. It doesn't matter if you're a doctor, lawyer, engine chief, you're still going to have some organizational things to have to go.
I found myself having pizza with friends of mine who were lifetime law enforcement people, and they looked around the pizza place and sort of pointed out the profiling. It was profiling. Okay, now there's the coke dealer, there's the meth dealer.
They're pretty good at it.
Here's the guy that hasn't paid his parking tickets, and that guy's all right.
And the guy with one tooth lives in Lake County. It is, you're right, they can size things up pretty close.
So you got to where you could do that. You became a skilled observer of people, their habits, probably their preferences became intuitive. Yeah. And so you could work that professionally and personally.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. It reminds me of a story of this guy was a chauffeur for a world-renowned doctor. And what they would do is tour the country, and this doctor was paid big bucks to get up in front of these medical groups and go through his thing about whatever the topic. And one day the chauffeur said to him, I've heard your shtick so much. I'll bet that I could get up in front and you could have my chauffeur's uniform on, and nobody will know the difference. And he said, well, let's try it. So they on the road, and they get this very important meeting, and the doctor is sitting back in his chauffeur's outfit, and this guy is up addressing the crowd, and after he gets through with the thing, he's going to the question and answers part. And somebody comes up with an answer that is new and stumps him. And so you stand up there and he says, said, no criticism intended here or anything, but I've got to be honest with you. That last question is such a basic, such a simple question that I'm going to have my chauffeur in the back of the room answer it. So you got to know how to improvise and shift quick.
Yeah.
Glad that happened, glad that happened. Like when I was interviewing college days, I was interviewing Mobil Oil, and I remember when I had finished and I didn't really want the job, I was just practicing. But when I got up to leave the interview, I tripped on a plug socket or something that was close to this desk. And man, I did a St. fucking Vitus dance you wouldn't believe. But I didn't lose my footing, so I turned around and looked over this interview, and I said, that just lets you know I'm fast on my feet, too. And I think I could have had that job, But, yeah, it was really, I guess, to sum up the things like the IBM stuff or the Merrill Lynch stuff, I guess, all these people that I thought, man, they really must be special. The workaday world people in financial, whatever. Not artistic, that's a whole different deal. But to know that they're just like everybody else. And the only thing is, they probably, in many cases, pay equal or probably a bigger part of their life and their hide, the more complex the job gets. And sometimes, and I don't know that there are any guarantees if you drive a UPS truck and you're on King of Queens, because you just drive that truck and get the paycheck and die someday. But to get out there and do some of the jobs that, man, you look at these people, you go, hey, shit, they're responsible for 350,000 people in some stupid wrong decision. And then you find out they're not even as smart as you. A lot of them, I'm not kidding you.
Yeah.
And especially when you get into the nepotism stuff and like, Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Who is going through that right now? Well, you kind of, in a way, with the radio, you got the Sun now runs the show, but people are interested in it, so you got to contend with maybe someday they'll hit the right price. So you have to kind of be aware that there's that one person that kind of controls not your life, but a big change if something should happen.
Certainly, somebody else's self-interest could have a
Yeah.
profound effect on my life.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
just the way it is.
that's why to figure out whether it be like we were talking last night, does it pay to, and do you have time to, whether it's using cold callers to set up the game or what?
Could be, but that's a different discussion.
It is.
So
Yeah.
we're talking about your life.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So how long
I'd like to be working in yours.
How long did you stay at IBM?
15 years.
15, a good long stretch.
Yeah,
Okay.
I made 14 exemplary 100% clubs out of 15.
Uh-huh.
And the only reason I didn't get that one, it was whatever, it was an exceptional
Was it the
situation.
last year that you were there?
I think it was number 13.
Okay. Seems like a good gig. I think most guys would have probably just dug in, continue to climb that ladder, and maybe get to a rung and rest there, and it would have been a good place to be. You decided to move on from IBM to becoming a broker, entering financial services. Why?
Well, I think the biggest reason was, first of all, IBM was evolving into an organization that was kind of an also-ran.
Huh?
When they were breaking up the big whale of power into little sharks, they thought what that would do is change that too big to fail and have too much control when you got the only game in town and all that stuff. When in fact, the end of the thing on that with IBM even today that wasn't the case. But to watch that type of thing happen, where, like in a lot of the training I did, it was not uncommon to do, say, on a 2-year product development life in a high tech or something, whatever of importance, to know that in all likelihood, 50-50 chance maybe, by the time you put in 2 years of training of thousands of people, all the manufacturing development, you found out that it was already outclassed. And you were already halfway through it. But back then, they couldn't just cancel a project, lay off 100,000 people, and they continued to the end of the line on a lot of those things and then bandsawed them because the package, the agreements, the contracts were already in position. So to say, like Jenna, your sister, had that job offering at that company. She went to work for them, and they canceled the package about 2 weeks after she got there. So they said, look, we're paying you $8,000 a month. We're going to pay you that for a whole year. But you have to come to work every day, do nothing, just sit here. And the vast majority, as she tells the story, she lasted about 2 weeks. He said, I can't do this in my life. Sit around even collecting a paycheck. It's unhealthy.
Right.
So that's kind of, there were a lot
did
of...
you hit a point of dissatisfaction with IBM, or did you not see a future with the company?
Yeah.
What was it that was the catalyst of the shift into financial
a
services?
combination of who my runaround group, where I was getting more and more interested in Wall Street. And I also, I wasn't happy with the fact that companies like IBM, because they pretty much own you, it was part salary and part commission. Well, I was good enough where I think I started out with a 65% salary, 35% commission. Well, at that cut, I was doing well enough, so I was making more than my manager. And the way they cure that is they take away part of your territory, increase your quota, and fuck you for all the efforts that you did proving how good you were and one of the top people. and part of that was my fault. I never wanted to go into the manager thing. I was invited to PDP schools and training things to become a marketing manager. It just never, hark there they go, I must hasten after them, for I am their leader, because I'm a Pisces. And I don't even want to have responsibility for me, much less anybody else. It's crazy with just myself.
Yeah.
So with that, I kind of, it's a good thing I left them when I did and went to Wall Street. And that was done mainly because I knew that if I could cold call for dialing dollars for dollars in the night, which was nearly impossible, it is impossible today, that if I build a book at my age, I could probably hit anything over $250 million. You can just sit around and update bond portfolios, and you don't have to do any trading because there's enough assets there at a turn ratio of, say, 4. You could make $200,000 just going to work.
Okay. But it seems like the dance would be missing. So what
Yeah.
I'm looking for is why IBM started to cease being satisfying to you, and then you needed a new adventure. I suppose maybe that was it. You needed a new, different kind of dance,
Yeah.
and you needed to go through the cold calling. Maybe that was satisfying in a way to
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
You needed to win someone over.
Plus, at the time, I was violating one of the big corporate no-nos, which today they'd send me to the island of Elba, to be with Napoleon, because you didn't mess around with your trainees that were a little less than half your age.
Oh,
So I met one of the
and that
loves
was
of my
IBM.
life. That was IBM.
okay.
She came in as a trainee, and I was going through the basics of marketing and training and stuff, and we became very close. And so one thing led to another, and for things that, because you can't keep anything like that quiet. The only thing that happened with me is these slime balls, these other guys that wanted to get next to this lady, were terribly jealous, and they turn kind of vile when they get jealous because they know they got to go home to their wife at night. And there's an old country song that was written not long ago. It's tough to kiss the lips at night that chew your ass off all day long. So when they got to go home to their wives, it pissed them off that I got this long-legged, gorgeous, brilliant, wonderful, a woman like I've never met. And I got over 3 years of that. Now it cost me a marriage and a whole bunch of stuff, but as far as a memory, shit, I'd do it all over again.
Mm-hmm.
And it was torture, really. There's an old Johnny Cash song, trying to love 2 women is like a ball and chain.
Yeah, it's not Johnny Cash.
Somebody
I
else.
think it might be Johnny Russell.
Maybe
but I'm not
Johnny,
sure of that.
yeah,
not sure of
okay,
that.
anyway.
But I know the song.
Usually I can pass that on with no question, but now I can't.
Yeah,
You
well,
know that.
right.
But
Okay,
yeah,
so
it
was there a correlation then with the end of your relationship with Annie and the end of your time with IBM?
Oh, absolutely.
Uh-huh.
You
Okay.
bet. As a matter of fact, because when you see with IBM, if you were you had any status at all, success record, and you were going to leave the company, it was like heresy, like the worst thing you can do, to insult IBM, to say, you mean he's going to go with Merrill Lynch, become a Wall Street guy, and leave this piece of cake job? Are you kidding me? But the time had come where, first of all, the Annie thing was, depleting, so that wasn't the real reason. But that company had changed and limited my potential success. And knowing the man that I did in Santa Rosa, Merrill Lynch, who is, by the way, I think he's still alive. He's about 105 now. And they named the college buildings after him. I think it's Almagini is the guy's name. And they didn't, when you went into the brokerage business back then, especially with the number one firm, Merrill Lynch, they would put you through these multi-layering abilities, like blow your mind, seeing where you'd overload in decision making and laying out mock things that see how you react to that.
Mm-hmm.
And they did a lot of crazy stuff, IBM as well, color of the room, topic, just kind of seeing how they can categorize, and because they're looking into the future, like they're doing with your brother-in-law now, Stephanie's husband. They're looking at him big time, and that's why it's critical at this point because he's good, he's got the talent, and he didn't get where he's at anyway other than talent. But now he's got the thing about the formal education shit, which is one of the rungs. But he's one of those guys that, man, when they saw him, high school diploma or not, he's good. He must be. I'm assuming, And but I thought I'd work for Anthony. He's good. He's a smart.
But now
man.
you're at Merrill Lynch.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's an opportunity. Was it threatening? You're in your early to mid 40s, I would say. How did you feel about that? It must not have puckered your butt quite as much as coming into IBM, still the kid from Dakota, because now you have achieved something in California, and you're a Californian by now.
Yeah. Yeah, it was kind of, I was experiencing some domestic malfunction. It was about the time I was divorcing Nancy when I was switching careers. And so in that regard, it was a challenge. And yet, I don't know, it just was the thing, it seemed like the thing to do. And I remember that just like I believe the self-esteem is the nucleus of all being, obviously. And if you feel good about yourself and what you're doing and the approach you're doing, your likelihood of making a go of it is pretty good. And it was a step up for me to start working in things that were more now. The Dow was just crossing 1,000 in 1981 when I became a broker. It's now 24,000. It should be about 15,000 right now by numbers, whatever. But so, yeah, to be part of that, where when I came in to have a $500 million share trading day was a big day. Now it's 10 billion, whatever, because of the capability of the machines to do that.
Sure.
So,
was it very exciting to you? And if so, for how long? What were the best years?
Probably it became more, especially after Annie, when that ended, and going into the brokerage business, I really did, miss IBM was an easier thing. And I really, man, I'll tell you, it ain't easy dialing, if you get 100 fucking phone calls to get one maybe. And then to get over lying to yourself about, they had these back in the olden days, these recipe cards. And when you'd make a call, you'd make note if they threatened police action. All those little, and then you'd think, boy, they're pretty good. And you keep chasing. This is a malady of marketing. You think, oh, this is good. I'll close them in about 100 years. So let's set them back. It was all, but it was quite an experience. For whatever reason, because even though I don't have the melodious tones that you do, I've got to believe that the reason I was significantly more, I guess the word would be expert at figuring out, even by voice inflection, how I was going to be. And then the willingness or the ability after a while to know when to back out of it. But I'll tell you, I never lost sight of how very important it was to sit down with people and talk about, at whatever age, what their future is going to be financially. And, if I had anything to do with enhancing that, it isn't shown now because people are less ready to retire today than ever in history. And it's a good combination of things. But, it's still one of those deals where it's a thankless profession because you're bound to, it's like going to Reno. It's gambling. And you're ultimately going to make a wrong choice. And unless you really know unless you get to a point where you got, 50 million and you can afford to lose 2 without rocking the boat. But most people, man, people that take their life savings. Imagine this, like somebody takes their 401k, they quit a job, now they've just worked 35, 40 years. They're going to come in with a goddamn 401k to the duty broker, who is the newbie that's trying to build his book, but he doesn't know how to spell Wall Street. And so you say, here's all the money I worked all my life for. Could you maybe help me and do something with it and don't fuck over me? And even though I know your employee is probably the biggest fuck over company around, Merrill Lynch, was no longer in business, by the way, they went bankrupt, and they were given to another bankrupt company, Bank of America.
Which was how you started in your banking career,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
You know, kind of a full
Not
circle.
realizing I was complicit to skullduggery because it was so well hidden.
Yeah.
The feds would never allow any prosecution of like Bernie Madoff. They knew about Bernie Madoff for 15, 16, 17 years, that it was a Ponzi scheme and crazy, big bang when that one went down. But why would they want to scare everybody and start investigations of everything? And fortunately for the outlaws, it didn't. Because even though Moody's and Dun & Bradstreet and those companies that were supposed to be rating treasuries with top, because of full faith and credit of the United States government. So they were rating junk bonds like treasuries. And so these people, the minute they bought a junk corporate bond, their chance of losing their money was 50% at least, maybe more. And yet when they questioned the female head of I think it was Dun & Bradstreet, she said, well, if we didn't cheat, somebody would. And Moody's would like take the business. So, we figured somebody's got to fuck them. We'll fuck them. She didn't say it like that. But.
So that was a culture that you simmered in for quite some time in your life.
Yeah.
Do you ever have feelings of remorse, guilt, shame?
No, because the experience when it was happening was a real education. And to be able to be one of my favorite presentations when I got lucky enough to have somebody come to me and say, hey, you made sense about, we got to start shifting stuff around here because, we can't just have 100% of our assets in treasuries. They don't pay enough.
Sure.
We got to get out there with 20% of our assets and try to bump that up to a 15% return instead of 5, which it probably was back then on CDs. So what I would do with them, though, is I say, let me tell you how this works. We're going to talk further about something that interests you. And if it doesn't interest you, don't buy it, because you're going to be thinking about this a lot. And if it's toilet paper manufacturing, don't do that. Get yourself probably a Chuck E. Cheese. They're new. They've got some, whatever. So I said, but what's going to happen? We're going to select something that interests you. Let's say it's $20 a share. So we'll decide that's a good thing. We're going to buy it, but you don't buy and hold anymore. You buy and you have a plan to, in a certain time period, if we reach, like, say, $30 a share for what you bought for $20, we're going to review it and make a decision whether we move on to something else, because that's getting a little weighty, And what'll happen is we'll probably go, my God, when we first dealt with this guy, as the stock we bought for $20 went to 15, I thought he was the dumbest shit on earth. I was so angry with him. And then one day it goes to 30, and he calls us and says, you've made 100% on your money in 6 months. Your $20 item is now 30. And so you say, man, let's sell, take the profit. But then you're going to pick up the fucking newspaper for the next month, looking at that and saying, and sure as shit, it's going to go to 40. Now you're going to say, that greedy prick, he must have kids in college because he is willing to rape us. He just had to take that $10 profit per commission, that piece of shit broker. What the fuck? I said, that's what this is all about. There ain't no happiness in this. Now, if you still want to do that, great. But I don't need any goddamn lawsuits, because you can sign in triplicate never to sue me because I did everything right. But the company I represent told me at training, if somebody comes after you for 100,000 and we can settle for 25, and it's going to ruin your career, but it's going to save us 75, that's what you're going to do. You still want the job? And so that's how I work. Now, unless you are going to feel comfortable with this, now I don't need any moaning and groaning shit. I'm too busy for that. But you're gambling here. It's just a different name for it, Wall Street. So that's the game. You still want to do it. And boy, they didn't. They still bitch, too. I only had one person ever take after me, though, and I beat his ass. He owed me 10,000. Never paid it, but he owed me 10,000 after arbitration. But yeah, it was a wild game. I was very, again, all of these things. I don't. The deal of finding IBM because of a brother-in-law when it was the place to work. What a lucky break that was. It just happened. If him only in my own mind. He propelled me. He didn't really help me get in. He didn't make any phone calls to me. I got lucky in another way. And it was the same thing in Wall Street. Just to have an icon of the game say, Jesus, boy, you were good at IBM, but I know some of the guys you worked for, man. I tell you what, we want you to work here. You don't have to go to any of the training schools, any of the PDPs. We know you can handle it.
Sure.
So that's what I'd waltz into Merrill Lynch when the Dow was crossing 1,000. And then from there on out, the most I ever managed was about 125, 30 million, which wasn't much. But you just don't make, you're not doing automatic six-figure income with that. The most I ever made in industry was like the 160 grand, which obviously back then it was quite a bit.
Sure.
But my nut to crack at one time was probably what combined with Sally and myself. I probably had a monthly nut of about 32,000.
To break even, you had to make 32,000
to keep everything afloat.
Wow.
And that was okay because it was happening.
Mm-hmm.
But then, like when I divorced Nancy, my child support was $3,700 a month, family support they called it. Well, then the market in '87 took a shit. My income went to half, and so then I had to pay attorneys again to get back into court to have it lowered to $1,700 a month. But I paid the bills all the way through. That's what you do when you're divorced.
What do you? We're going to wrap it up here
right.
with a final comment as far as your time with Wall Street. What are you proudest of that you did there? And I'm fishing for something that I think I know.
I guess to impact that I can remember that really made a difference with people that became good friends of mine in the most unusual situation you ever think was the working girls, the courtesans at the chicken ranch. Because they were so thankful that I gave it crap enough to say, hey, when you walk out of here with 10 grand, now you got a boyfriend or a husband or whatever, they're going to want that money. Now you really need to stash some of that shit, and we can work it through the front office so that you'll even get of what they're charging you in taxation, those rat bastards. I mean, like waitresses paying taxes. So just my whole thing about that. But to care enough to not only help them stash a few bucks so they can be proud to have a retirement account like everybody else, and then to think up stuff like the tanning machines. Tan those bronze bodies. Give us those things free because you're going to be able to brag about tanning the bronze bodies of the courtesans of the world in the chicken ranch. Bada, bada, bada. Man, we got those beds free. They even paid the postage. And then the panties thing, that was a hitchhike on the tanning beds. And then from that, the oxygen machines. Man, I had a lot of fun with that.
Sure.
Because it got me, I'm damn near went into the business because it was just starting to go crazy. They were just placing those things in exit doors of casinos and stuff. Because
Sure.
3 in the morning, it was great. So to that, in answer to your question, that was probably the thing that not only made me feel good about what I was able to do with that microcosm of people, but to be educated on what it was all about. That saving the grief, the disease, the death of people because of irresponsibility again and how things are run was really something that I liked. And I liked being Grandpa Don or Daddy Don. I wasn't there to go, you know, this is, yeah, it'd be ridiculous. I mean, like make a fool, old guys make fools of themselves, but not this hombre. I mean, I knew that. In fact, I would say when they say, hey, Grandpa Don, you want to take me on? I said, I'd rather live. So I see you around, you know, and that was a joke, you know. They said, and obviously, I said, come on, you kid me. So, I mean, like with Bridget, and we were like, of course, old guy, sister, brother thing. But she said, imagine, let's say you did think you could sneak out of here with Eden or something, and she'd play with your pee-pee, you know, you'd think you had a real, people find out, you'd be out of here. Because, you know, you can't do that. Because then
You got away with it at IBM, but not here.
not here, yeah, because it's a place where they really watch it, you know.
Right.
And the anger in there, you know, hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. You can imagine out there, whatever. One of the good parts of that, too, I got.
Hold on.
Yeah.
I'm going to come back, okay?
All right.
But what I'm fishing for is talking to people about black marks on paper as you're coming down the tunnel of time.
All right.
Classic Don line.
Twelve 15. We're going to let you go to bed. I mean, it's 12:15. Man, this is amazing. This is a lot of